You know, I've always thought there's something about the villains of any story that's just so captivating.
Oh, absolutely. The way they just disregard the rules or even the scale of their ambition, it's fascinating.
And today we're looking at a faction in Warhammer 40K that embodies that unsettling feeling, the Death Guard.
They really are a study in contrasts, from paragons of order to avatars of decay.
It makes you wonder how they went from being the Emperor's most unbreakable legion, known for their discipline and methodical warfare, well, embodying decay and entropy in the most extreme way.
It's a journey for sure, from Dusk Raiders to the horrifying Plague Marines we know them as now.
Yeah, before we get to the decay and the horror, they started out as the Dusk Raiders,
Yeah.
and that name really did fit their tactics.
Oh, yeah. They were known for launching attacks under the cover of darkness. Very methodical, very strategic.
There's more to it than just tactics.
Yeah.
Their Primarch Mortarion had a huge hand in shaping their identity.
Mortarion's a fascinating figure in his own right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, raised by a necromancer overlord on a planet called Barbarous, perpetually choked by poisonous fog.
That's going to leave a mark on you.
It instilled in him a unique understanding of strength and survival, that's for sure.
It's ironic in a way, isn't it? Mortarion raised by a sorcerer who wielded power over life and death, yet he despised sorcery in all its forms.
You'd think he'd be all for it.
But no, he led a legion known for using toxic weaponry
Yeah.
and exhibiting this almost superhuman endurance. It's a real contradiction.
And that disdain for sorcery, that belief in his own strength above all else, it fueled a simmering resentment towards the Emperor.
Ah, yes, the Emperor.
Mortarion saw his arrival on Barbarous and his defeat of Mortarion's foster father as a theft of his victory.
He felt robbed of his moment.
Exactly, a complex relationship full of resentment and a sense of betrayal.
And that resentment, as we'll see, would be a key factor in his fall to chaos.
When Horus rebelled against the Emperor, Mortarion saw an opportunity to lash out at the injustices he felt he had suffered. But the betrayal at Istvan III would show just how deep Horus's treachery ran.
Istvan III, a turning point for so many legions.
Absolutely, to purge any loyalty to the Emperor, Horus deployed virus bombs against his own legions, including the Death Guard.
Can you imagine the psychological impact of that, to see your own brothers turn on you, to watch them succumb to such a horrific death?
It was a shattering blow to the Death Guard, known for their resilience and stoicism.
And it was in the aftermath of Istvan III, trapped within the warp and ravaged by disease, that they truly succumbed to Nurgle's embrace.
Now, for those who might not be familiar, the warp is essentially a chaotic dimension of raw psychic energy.
A realm of demons and nightmarish entities where reality itself is fluid and unpredictable.
To be trapped there, exposed to its corrupting influence, it would be a fate worse than death for many.
The Death Guard, their bodies, once symbols of strength and resilience, became ravaged by decay. They transformed into plague marines, avatars of pestilence and decay, eternally rotting, but immune to pain.
A complete inversion of their original identity, a tragic fall from grace.
Their strength, their very essence, twisted and corrupted into something horrific.
It really makes you think about the nature of resilience and what it means to endure when survival comes at such a cost.
And Mortarion himself ascended to demonhood, becoming a demon prince of Nurgle, a being of immense power.
He established his new homeworld, the Plague Planet, a nightmarish reflection of Barbarous with 7 mountaintop, keeps each ruled by a plague company, each a bastion of a specific horrifying brand of plague and decay.
It's a grim picture.
Oh, it is. The Death Guard still cling to their legion structure, that sense of order amidst the chaos, but they are now driven by the whims of Nurgle, by the endless cycle of decay and rebirth.
They've become a terrifying and efficient instrument of his will.
A chilling reminder that even in the face of unimaginable corruption, something can endure.
The question is, at what cost? It's interesting when you think about it, Mortarion's intense hatred of sorcery when he was raised by a necromancer.
A real paradox, isn't it? He mastered toxic warfare and weaponry that many would see sorcerous, yet he loathed psychers and anyone drawing power from the warp.
He saw it as a weakness, a reliance on something external rather than your own inner strength.
His upbringing on Barbarous really shaped that worldview for him.
Oh, absolutely. He was found as an infant by Decay, the planet's overlord, raised in a world where survival meant mastering the toxic arts.
He learned to wield poisons and toxins, but he never saw them as anything more than tools, just extensions of his own will.
And he absolutely despised Decay's reliance on sorcery, saw it as a true weakness.
When Mortarion rebelled against his foster father, it was with an army of hardened human warriors, the precursors to the Death Guard we know today.
Fighting their way to the top of Barbarous's poison-choked mountains.
but they could never quite reach Necare's fortress. The heights were shrouded in atmospheres so toxic that even they couldn't survive it.
And that's where the Emperor enters the picture, arriving on Barbarous in all his glory.
A moment of destiny, the Primarch reunited with his Gene Father, but Mortarion saw it as a threat.
He thought the Emperor would take his victory over Necare, that he would steal his right to rule Barbarous.
The Emperor sensed that distrust in Mortarion, and he offered him a challenge: defeat Necare and prove your strength, and I'll leave you to rule.
If not, you join the Great Crusade and lead the 14th Legion, the Dusk Raiders.
It was a challenge Mortarion couldn't refuse. He had to prove himself to show that his strength came from within, not from some higher power.
So he ventured into those toxic heights, determined to finally defeat his foster father.
But even Mortarion's resilience had its limits. He collapsed on the verge of death, poisoned by the very atmosphere he was trying to master.
And at that moment of weakness, the Emperor stepped in.
Unaffected by the toxic air, he entered Necare's fortress and struck him down.
A liberation for the people of Barbarous, but for Mortarion, a bitter defeat.
He saw it as a theft, a denial of his own agency, and that resentment festered within him.
So he joined the Great Crusade, leading the Death Guard with a stoic determination that masked a simmering anger at the Emperor.
They were known as the most resilient and unbreakable of the legions, embodying Mortarion's philosophy of enduring hardship and relying on your own strength.
But under that stoicism, the seeds of their downfall were already sown.
Their pride, their disdain for anything that even hinted at weakness, blinded them to the whispers of chaos.
They judged others for relying on sorcery or faltering, but they couldn't see their own vulnerabilities.
It's a tragic irony that their strengths, their unwavering self-reliance, would lead them down a path of corruption.
And in their transformation into Plague Marines, we see that irony writ large.
They become the very thing Mortarion despised: decay, disease, reliance on forces outside themselves.
Their strength twisted into a mockery, their bodies ravaged by the forces they sought to control.
Even their weaponry reflects this transformation. They keep elements of their past, their love of close combat and heavy firepower, but everything is corrupted, warped by Nurgle.
Their bolters spewing forth swarms of diseased flies, their power fists dripping with slime.
Their armor, once a symbol of strength, now covered in pustules, boils weeping sores.
Their very being a weapon, a conduit for Nurgle's power.
And then there are the demon engines. They field some of the most monstrous and terrifying in the entire Warhammer 40K universe.
Like the Defiler, a lumbering monstrosity of metal and demonic flesh, armed with truly grotesque weaponry.
Their corrupted land raiders, once symbols of Imperium, might now crawl across battlefields like bloated insects.
Spewing plagues and disgorging corrupted Astartes, their very presence speaks volumes about Nurgle's power to corrupt even the most formidable war machines.
It's a chilling thought.
And then there's the recurring motif of the number 7 in their lore. 7 great companies, 7 plague companies, 7 mountaintop keeps on the plague planet. It can't just be coincidence.
The number 7 holds a deep occult significance within Nurgle's realm, a symbolic resonance that underscores their utter devotion to him.
It's woven into their rituals, their organization, their very essence, adding another layer of horror to their already disturbing lore.
Almost as if that number represents their fall from grace, a constant reminder of their corruption.
And speaking of corruption, their story isn't just about physical decay, it's about a spiritual corruption, a warping of their values and beliefs.
They were once paragons of loyalty and resilience. Now they're avatars of decay, spreading Nurgle's plagues and reveling in the entropy they unleash.
Their story makes us question the nature of strength, the cost of resilience, and the insidious lure of chaos, a story that both fascinates and repulses.
Their story really is a tragedy, but you can't deny just how effective the Death Guard are as a force of chaos.
I mean, they embody Nurgle's whole philosophy perfectly. Disease and decay aren't just about destruction. They're also instruments of change and transformation.
A twisted kind of resilience, if you ask me, to not just survive, but thrive in that state of perpetual rot.
It really challenges how we think about strength and what it means to endure.
Their tactics, too, they just advance relentlessly, unfazed by pain or injury. Their presence alone spreads disease and weakens the enemy before a shot is even fired.
It's like an unstoppable force of nature, just a tide of decay washing over everything, leaving only ruin.
And their tactics mirror their nature perfectly. They're not about quick strikes or precision. They're about attrition, slowly wearing down their enemy, eroding their morale and will to fight.
The embodiment of that slow, inevitable advance of decay.
And imagine facing them in battle, that psychological impact of standing against an army that doesn't fear death, that seems to revel in its own decay.
It preys on our most primal fears, an army that weaponizes disease, turning the battlefield into a vector for Nurgle's plagues.
They tap into those anxieties we all have about disease and suffering and the unknown.
The Death Guard twists the very act of survival into a grotesque ordeal, a constant struggle against the inevitable.
And the resilience isn't just physical, it's psychological too. They've embraced their corruption, their decay, and they've turned it into a strength.
They find a perverse kind of joy in their suffering and the spread of disease and that whole cycle of decay and rebirth that Nurgle represents.
There's this disturbingly cheerful element to them. They're not just about death and destruction. There's almost a carnival aspect to their rituals, their war cries, even their appearance.
Well, it speaks to the paradoxical nature of Nurgle himself. He's the god of decay and death, but also the god of rebirth, of new life springing from rot.
He embodies that cycle of nature, the inevitability of change, and his followers embrace it with this strange, unsettling enthusiasm.
Their laughter becomes a weapon, a kind of contagion meant to unsettle, to disarm, to sow doubt in the hearts of their enemies.
A reminder that victory for the Death Guard isn't just about physical domination. It's about corrupting the spirit, too.
It's this fascinating and disturbing element to their lore that really challenges our ideas of good and evil, of hero and villain.
It makes you confront the idea that even in the darkest corners of the universe, there can be this twisted kind of joy.
The Death Guard really reflect the grim darkness of the Warhammer 40K universe, a place where hope is just a flickering candle in the face of overwhelming darkness.
But even in that darkness, in the midst of all that decay and despair, there are still stories to tell, lessons to be learned, and maybe even a glimmer of morbid fascination to be found.
They remind us that the universe is a vast and complex place, full of wonders and horrors that defy easy categorization. They really challenge our understanding and force us to confront the darker aspects of existence.
And maybe by confronting those darker aspects, by exploring the depths of their corruption, we can understand ourselves a little bit better, our own capacity for resilience, and the forces that shape our lives.
The Death Guard story doesn't offer easy answers or simple morals. It raises more questions than it answers.
But it's a story that stays with you, makes you think, and challenges you to confront the unsettling realities of this universe.
It leaves us pondering the implications of their resilience. What does it say about survival? What can we learn from their embrace of decay, about the cycles of change? And maybe most unsettling of all, what does their laughter tell us about the nature of joy?